Hello, good morning, and welcome everyone. Welcome to this externally led patient-focused drug development forum on primary sclerosing cholangitis. I'm Veronica Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the Forum for Collaborative Research and also a professor at the UC Berkeley School of Public Health. One of our projects at the forum is the PSC Forum, and it has been our pleasure to work with PSC partners and the international PSC community on this important project. Today's forum really provides us with a unique opportunity to make our voices heard. We are making our voices heard today. I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough. We thank the FDA for allowing us this opportunity to share this information with the agency and, of course, the whole PSC community. I want to particularly also thank Will Llewellyn from the FDA for his guidance throughout the planning process. Also, we want to thank John Dudley and the team for offering this very safe studio space. And we will now continue. I will pass on to my co-moderator, Mary Villas.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mary Villas. I'm the president of PSC Partners Seeking a Cure Canada, the Canadian affiliate of the US-based PSC Partners Seeking a Cure. I'm also a parent of a young adult who has PSC. I cannot tell you how happy we are to be here. A large team from PSC Partners has been preparing for this meeting, and we are very excited the day is finally here. We cannot thank Dr. Miller enough for her support of our efforts, both with this meeting and with the PSC Forum. Today is going to be quite different from our typical PSC Partners events, which surprisingly are incredibly fun. But PSC is hard. Hearing and talking about it, honestly, will be hard. Today is about sharing the unvarnished reality of what it is like to live with PSC so that decision makers at the FDA and at pharmaceutical companies can understand our reality and our unmet needs. Coming up are honest testimonials that illustrate the painful reality of living with PSC. Just a warning, these will be intense. The person who should be sitting in this co-moderator seat next to Dr. Miller is Ricky Safer, founder and CEO of PSC Partners and the North Star of our PSC Partners community. As a PSC patient, traveling to be here in person during COVID was not a good option, and I'm honored that Ricky has entrusted this role to me. Ricky is joining us now live from her home in Denver, Colorado to set the stage for today's event.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, I'm Ricky Safer, and I'd like to welcome everyone to PSC Partners Seeking a Cure's externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. On behalf of our primary sclerosing cholangitis community, and as founder and volunteer CEO of PSC Partners Seeking a Cure, I'd really like to thank the FDA for giving us their approval to let us present our patient voice today. Though initially we were extremely disappointed about the shift from an in-person to a virtual meeting due to the pandemic, we have instead focused on sharing with you virtually the burden and challenges that PSC patients live with every single day. We hope that our hard work in making these next 5 hours emotionally engaging will be enough to keep you focused on our intense desire for better treatments and a cure for PSC. I would like to extend a sincere thank you to all our PSC patients and caregivers who understand the importance of opening up their hearts and sharing stories that are often personal and painful. PSC can be a brutal disease, and we appreciate the willingness of our speakers, panelists, and attendees to be open and honest about how PSC has impacted their lives. I would also like to thank our two wonderful volunteer moderators, Dr. Veronica Miller and Mary Villas. We are proud to present today's program solely on the support of our generous, dedicated, and compassionate community. Thanks to our community donors whose amazing generous support has made this happen. Lastly, we are grateful for all our audience members, the FDA, clinicians, researchers, pharmaceuticals, rare disease advocates, and the PSC community who are listening in today to support us in our quest to advance drug development for primary sclerosing cholangitis. I am a PSC patient. Every day, I am made more aware of the complex and idiopathic disease that I am afflicted with. I understand the label, the last black box of liver disease, that researchers have attributed to PSC. I have experienced firsthand how a PSC diagnosis forces us to re-envision and redefine our lives. PSC hits each of us very differently. First slide, please. In my case, before my devastating PSC diagnosis 17 years ago, I lived the life of a health, nutrition, and exercise fanatic. In my mind, I had correlated my endless energy and excellent health to this lifestyle. That personal philosophy was suddenly destroyed in March 2004 when I found myself in the emergency room with what I would later learn was my first cholangitis attack and the beginning of my unpredictable and unrelenting journey with PSC. I will never forget the words I heard from my physician the day of my diagnosis and the utter fear of being told that I have a rare, sometimes terminal, progressive disease with no known treatment except a liver transplant, that perhaps a matching liver wouldn't be available when I would need it, that PSC can recur after transplant, that I would be at significantly high risk for cholangiocarcinoma, colon cancer, and other GI cancers, that I would likely be diagnosed with various autoimmune comorbidities, starting with IBD, that my physician couldn't offer me an individual prognosis for this unpredictable disease, and that there is no cure in sight. My personal struggle in dealing with my altered lifestyle created the impetus for starting PSC Partners Seeking a Cure in 2005. My supportive, wonderful family and I quickly understood the destructive path of PSC with its lack of treatment options, the absence of reliable sources of information for patients, and the absence of any organized group to support the PSC cause. We were appalled to see that there was no cure in sight. Next slide, please. The stated mission of our nonprofit organization, PSC Partners Seeking a Cure, and our affiliate, PSC Partners Seeking a Cure Canada, is to provide education and support to patients, families, and caregivers, and to raise funds to fund research to find causes, treatments, and a cure for PSC. This PSC meeting is the culmination of years of developing special programs and national and international collaborations. Today's meeting marks a big step for our community. We created our Voices survey with the goal of amplifying the voice of the patients who will be speaking today. 819 patients responded to the survey and provided a robust body of aggregated data, more of which we will publish in the future. Today, we'll be linking data extracted from the survey to each of our 4 panel discussions. Next slide, please. The first demographic slide displays the gender distribution for those who took our Voices survey. The results are not representative of the 2-to-1 male predominance in PSC. However, the survey results certainly reflect the female predominance in our patient registry, in our annual conferences, and generally in clinical trials. We continuously look for ways to reach males, but these survey results do accurately represent the perceptions of PSC patients. Next slide, please. Statistics show that PSC affects mostly middle-aged men, yet PSC affects people of all ages. The survey shows the wide age range and distribution of PSC patients participating in our survey. Next slide, please. Our survey results capture the full range of the PSC journey from diagnosis through post-transplant. That 23% of the survey respondents are post-transplant PSCers shows that transplant is not a cure, and that fear of PSC recurrence is a serious source of anxiety for post-transplant PSCers. Next slide, please. Despite our focus on outreach, this survey captures a serious gap in the lack of representation of people of color in our community. We are seeking greater collaboration with the medical community to locate and engage people of color. As a close-knit community, we keep alive the memory of those PSC patients who have passed away. Each and every one of them has left their mark on PSC Partners. Next slide, please. I'd like to end with some words written by Sandy, a PSC Partners outstanding leader and close friend, who sadly passed away 5 years ago at the age of 38, but whose wisdom and encouragement live on. Sandy's words are the embodiment of the true spirit that defines PSC Partners Seeking a Cure. I'm no longer who I used to be, but I'm a warrior. I'm a fighter and an educator. I'm unafraid to say that I have PSC, or to take the time to explain to a physician or a bystander what it is. I shout my differences in the name of education and awareness. I teach others not to judge by sight alone. I teach them to listen and help them to find compassion and to want to cure me, to cure those like me. I show those with my disease that they are not alone and that we're in this together. I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. And if my disease takes me tomorrow, it will be on my terms, and because I've taught what I needed to teach, and I've said what needed to be said. And yet, should that happen, I won't cease to exist. Who I was, what I did, those questions may still be asked. The answers, my answers, more researchers and doctors and civilians will know the name PSC. Sandy's words continue to encourage us every day. Even if just for a few hours, we invite you to experience our community and to learn more about what life is like with this rare and devastating disease. It is with a grateful heart and hope for the future that I thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you. Take it back to the studio, please.
Thank you, Ricky, for those very warm words of welcome and for sharing your own personal story and illustrating the fight that the PSC community is engaged in. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ruby Mehta. She's the medical officer at the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research in the Division of Hepatology and Nutrition. Ruby, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, organizers, for inviting me to give this talk, and congratulations on organizing this very relevant topic, meeting for a very relevant topic. I have no financial relationships to disclose. Patient-focused drug development is a systematic approach to help ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured and meaningfully incorporated into drug development and evaluation. Further integrating patients' input into drug development and decision-making. This is a life cycle approach shown on the slide. We need to build the patient's perspective starting right from the beginning, that is a translational phase. So as this diagram depicts, first we identify and measure the outcomes and burdens that matter the most to the patient. That helps in designing better clinical studies, recruit potential patients, and retain study participants in the clinical studies. During the pre-marketing review of the application, we integrate all that information from the patient-reported outcome and patient preferences information into the benefit risk assessment. And during the post-marketing cycle, after the drug is approved, it helps us communicate better information to patients and providers to facilitate informed decision-making. So now, in keeping with the definition of PFDD in mind, I would like to talk about FDA's patient-focused drug development initiative. FDA recognized a need for more systematic ways of gathering patient perspective and on their condition and treatment options. So in the PDUFA 5, FDA conducted 24 disease-specific PFDD meetings, giving patients and caregivers a platform to contribute input that can inform drug development and evaluation. 2 of these meetings were for dermatological conditions, in March 2016 for psoriasis, and in September 2017 for alopecia areata. So some PFDD meeting learnings to date include patients are experts on what it is like to live with their condition. They're able to articulate specific disease impacts, like the symptoms, loss of function, in concrete terms. They can identify and articulate what is important to them regarding treatment benefit. For progressive degenerative disease, many parents and patients feel an ideal treatment would be at minimum to stop progression of their children's loss of function. Their chief complaints may not be factored explicitly into drug development plans. For example, endpoint and measures of drug development in clinical trials. Patients want to be as active as possible in the work to develop and evaluate new treatments. And they are not expecting for FDA to address all the gaps in current treatment or current approaches to drug development, but do want FDA to help identify the most effective pathway for them to play major contributing roles. There was also growing external interest in expanding efforts to gather patient input in support of drug development and evaluation. So in 2015, we started welcoming patient organizations to identify and organize their own patient-focused collaborations. These externally led PFDD meetings provide an opportunity to hear directly from patients. Patient organization identify and organize patient-focused collaboration to generate public input on specific disease areas. PFDD meetings provide an important opportunity to hear directly from patients, patient advocates, caregivers about symptoms that matters most to them, the impact the disease has on patients' daily lives, and patients' experiences with current available treatment. While FDA will be open to participating in a well-designed and well-conducted meeting, an externally led PFDD meeting and any resulting product like surveys or reports will not be considered FDA-sponsored or FDA-endorsed. We have had externally led PFDD meetings in dermatology space, and including a meeting on hyperhidrosis in November 2017 and a meeting on Paronychia congenita in April 2018. Meetings such as externally led PFDD strengthens understanding of disease and treatment burden, what we call the therapeutic or the clinical context. The patient input from meetings can support FDA staff as they conduct benefit risk assessment for products under review or advise drug sponsors in their development program. We also believe that patient input collected from these meetings can have value to drug development more broadly. For example, by helping to identify area of unmet need, such as aspect of patient's condition that is not currently being addressed in current therapies. This input may also help developers as they identify or create tools used to measure benefit of potential therapies. The deliverables, a summary report from the externally led PFDD meeting, can be shared on FDA's website. And you see a link to this public website over here on the slide. You'll see that PFDD meetings are one component of the agency's larger effort to enhance the incorporation of patient input in medical product drug development and evaluation. We are also working on patient-focused methodological guidance series and a pilot grant program for standard core clinical outcome assessments that measure what matters most to patients, as well as increasing patient focus in other existing FDA endeavors. I have a link on the next slide for our FDA CDER patient-focused drug development webpage, which provides more details on all the efforts that are listed here. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for that good presentation that sets the stage for what today is all about. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Christopher Bolas. He's the Lina Valente Professor and Chief of Division of Gastroenterology and Hepatology at UC Davis. He's also the co-chair of the Science Medicine Advisory Committee for PSC Partners. Please go ahead, Dr. Bolas.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to join you this morning in this patient-focused drug development meeting. I'm very much looking forward to the further discussions today. What I've been charged with is to discuss the natural history, clinical management, and treatment of PSC in the next 15 minutes. In the interest of full disclosure, I do have some potential conflicts of interest to show. So primary sclerosing cholangitis, or PSC, is of course an inflammatory and fibrotic disease of the large and medium-sized bile ducts, both within the liver and outside the liver. It's strongly associated with inflammatory bowel disease, with approximately 3/4 of patients having this concomitant condition. There's a male predominance, which is quite unusual for an autoimmune condition, and PSC affects a wide range of ages, including pediatric patients, which we'll hear about later today. But in adults, it affects people usually in their 40s, but can affect older adults as well. Now, the pathogenesis of PSC is not very well understood. We do know that there are both genetic and environmental factors that increase an individual's susceptibility to PSC. And in those susceptible individuals, there is a series of disturbances that occur leading to the disease of PSC. And importantly, this includes the gut-liver axis, in which there are abnormalities or alterations in the gut microbiome, the intestinal permeability, as well as the inflammatory cells of the intestine, which can migrate to the liver through the portal vein. This then leads to injury of the biliary epithelial cells, or cholangiocytes, and their protective mechanisms that prevent injury from high concentrations of bile acids. This can lead to further recruitment of inflammatory cells, such as macrophages, and cause more chronic inflammation and injury, recruiting and activating cells that promote fibrosis, such as hepatic stellate cells and portal myofibroblasts. Each of these steps leads to the clinical presentation of PSC with the segmental fibrosis of the bile ducts. PSC is diagnosed primarily based upon the images we see in a cholangiogram, and they can be quite diverse, anywhere from mild stricturing of the extrahepatic bile ducts, sacculation shown in the middle image there of the PSC, or very extensive both intrahepatic and extrahepatic strictures of the bile duct. We categorize PSC into three major types, the most common being the large duct PSC, which is the classic form in which there are segmental strictures seen on the cholangiogram, and in absence of secondary causes of these strictures. And this can be in the presence or absence of IBD. There's PSC with overlap with autoimmune hepatitis, though this is not well defined and there's no consensus on the criteria for this. And then small duct PSC, in which the cholangiogram is normal, but there's typical histology on liver biopsy. PSC, of course, is a rare disease affecting approximately 30,000 individuals in the United States. We are limited somewhat in terms of our population-based studies of the epidemiology of PSC, given that there's no ICD-10 code historically, although recently this was adopted, and so hopefully going forward we'll have better data on the true epidemiology of PSC. Most epidemiologic studies have also been done in European populations or populations of European descent. So in the United States, we still are lacking some good epidemiologic data. And despite the fact that PSC is a rare liver disease, it accounts for approximately 4% of all liver transplants performed in the United States, suggesting that there is a disproportionate disease burden from PSC relative to its frequency relative to other chronic liver diseases. Now, we do know that PSC affects all racial and ethnic groups, and in fact, if you look at liver transplant listings in the United States, the relative proportion of individuals listed for liver transplantation with PSC is similar between whites and African Americans. And we've also seen that the proportion of patients that are African American within centers caring for patients with PSC is similar to the population that they care for in general. PSC can lead to a number of outcomes. Importantly, it leads to cirrhosis and its complications and the requirement for liver transplantation. In addition, there are several cancers that we are concerned about with PSC, including cholangiocarcinoma and colon cancer. And PSC can also lead to infections of the bile duct, such as cholangitis, which also can become a need for liver transplantation. The median survival of PSC has been reported to be anywhere from under 10 years to over 20 years throughout the years that this has been reported. The main difference between these studies typically relies upon whether the population studies comes from a center that is specializing in PSC and performs transplantation, whereas more recent studies looking at a more wide range of patients has identified the median survival of upwards of 20 years. What about PSC treatment? Oh, the reason we're here today is really to discuss how we move this forward, because currently we have no therapies that have been proven to be effective in altering the natural history of PSC. Of course, the most extensively studied has been ursodeoxycholic acid, and it's been tried at a range of studies in a number of different countries and populations, and in no cases have been demonstrated to improve survival. There are a number of targets based on the pathophysiology of PSC that have been attempted, mostly targeting the gut-liver axis, bile acids, recruitment of chronic inflammation, and more recently attacking fibrosis. So what are the unmet needs of PSC? Well, number one, we need treatments that target liver disease. As I mentioned, there's no therapy that's been demonstrated to have efficacy to improve survival. We have a poor understanding of the pathophysiology. And very importantly, we lack consensus on surrogate markers of clinical endpoints that make clinical trials very difficult to design and carry out. In addition to those outcomes in terms of survival and liver transplantation, patients with PSC suffer from a number of quality of life issues. This is data from the PSC patient registry in which patients reported symptoms that they experienced, and the 5 most common symptoms reported included fatigue, abdominal pain, pruritus or itching, diarrhea, and sleep disturbances, which affected more than 50% of patients. In addition, PSC affects women of childbearing age, and we know a lot about pregnancy and inflammatory bowel disease, but not so much in the setting of both PSC and inflammatory bowel disease. Now, some data from the PSC patient registry and other cohorts suggest that there's no increased risk of fetal loss or birth defects, but compared to non-PSC mothers, pregnancies of PSC mothers more frequently result in preterm births, and more frequently their children need to be admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit. So the second large unmet need in PSC is the need for treatment of symptoms. Currently, there are no therapies to improve how patients feel or function. We also have a lack of understanding of the extent, severity, and impact of these symptoms, and we lack validated PSC-specific patient-reportable outcome instruments. As I mentioned earlier, PSC patients are at risk of several cancers, particularly cholangiocarcinoma, which can occur over 1% annually. There's also a risk of gallbladder cancer, the more typical liver cancer of hepatocellular carcinoma, and recent studies suggest even pancreatic cancers at increased risk among patients with PSC. How we should survey or try to identify these cancers early so that they're treatable is unclear. We do have recommendations, but the frequency and modalities for surveillance are not well documented, and their benefits are still unknown. So the third unmet need in terms of PSC is the need for better cancer surveillance and better understanding of what tools are most sensitive and most beneficial for our patients. So in order to meet the needs of our PSC patients, we need new treatments. We do have 2 drugs in phase 3 study and several others planning phase 2, so there's lots of hope. We need active investigations of the pathophysiology, and this is continuing. And there are several multi-center prospective natural history studies, which hopefully will lead to the identification and validation of surrogate markers for clinical endpoints for future clinical trials. In terms of symptoms, there's ongoing validation of the PSC PRO instrument and development of new PR tools. And there are investigations of novel molecular diagnostics and advanced imaging, which hopefully will lead to better tools for cancer surveillance. So I want to thank you for your time and allowing me to participate in this conference, and I look forward to further discussion. And now back to our speakers.